He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Use the second lane from the right to turn right. Then take the first left onto Williamson Avenue.
I'm pulling up outside a big old residence in Freeman's Bay, quite a posh suburb in Auckland. The house is old by New Zealand standards, 19th century, wooden weatherboards with a wraparound veranda, sort of place you often see turned into consulting rooms for dentists or doctors. It's hosing down. Spring rain. Hello.
Well,
Glenn. G'day.
nice to meet you. Finally.
Lovely to meet you too. Excellent. Glenn White, a long-time friend of Warwick's, the Kiwi actor who used Aiping Wang's energy therapy to try and cure his HIV. Charming day for it.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I feel sorry for those people that are actually going to that Coldplay concert.
Oh my gosh. Coldplay were on at Mount Eden Park, the rugby stadium up the road that night. Coming from the UK, one imagines Chris Martin and the band are pretty used to gigging in the rain. That's them coming on. Can't play you any music though, because copyright. Back to Glenn.
So let me think. I met Warwick in 1986. I had worked at the museum cafeteria, in the Domain, with his sister. I think he joined us at one point. We used to do wash dishes and make sandwiches and that sort of stuff as a Sunday job.
I'd say Glenn's in his 50s, rude to ask. Dark brown hair, youthful face.
And then I guess our paths had crossed a number of times, and then Warwick and I had a bit of a story at one point. It was a very short story, but...
When you say story...
Oh, we were together. Yeah.
Kia ora, I'm Phil Vine from RNZ, and this is The Lodge. The Fall and Rise of a Wellness Cult, a podcast about healing, about the power of belief, its lasting effects on the believers and the believed.
He was a good-looking guy, about normal height, you'd say like a Mediterranean complexion.
Aucklander, Glenn White, owner of that great big villa. I was hoping that Glenn could fill in the missing gaps, help me to learn more about Warwick.
Brown eyes, dark skin, black hair, and charming. He was really charming.
Glenn and Warwick had been an item when they both lived in Auckland back in the 80s. They'd broken up before Warwick originally set out for the UK on his OE.
I think he was very popular with guys, and so I think he really definitely at that time he really launched himself on the gay scene in London, so to speak.
Back then, while Warwick was enjoying London, Glenn was working all over Southeast Asia as a mining geologist. There's a great picture of him in front of a red helicopter in a remote jungle riverbed, blue shirt, white hat, looking really Indiana Jones-ish.
From about 97 to 2001, I was based in London. So I was commuting from London to Indonesia. So I saw a lot of Warwick around that time.
Glenn had stayed with Warwick in the London flat I saw in Annie's doco. He was there when Warwick first started going to the Energy Bank, the place set up by the guru Aiping Wang.
He was in awe of her, there's no question, and this was life-changing for him. And he'd done a lot of things over the years, but this one seemed to resonate for him. But I'd seen these cycles before, so I thought this was just possibly another cycle.
What did he say about her?
He acknowledged that she was a controversial figure, but that was for people who didn't know her, and for, these were people who were sceptical and maybe concerned about the influence she could have over others. He hounded me to come along to the Energy Bank until one day he said, look, we're doing this intro session. Will you come? And I thought, oh God, I get him off my back, I'll come. I guess we were there for half the day. So I went in very sceptical. and I came out even more sceptical. A lot of the things didn't make any sense to me. It's like we were all supposed to sit there and with our mouths wide open, and the energy of the universe would pour into our mouths. And look, I've got a science degree. I've got a master's in science. So, something has to make sense to me scientifically for me to accept it. As I said to Warwick, I've got an open mind, but I'm not going to let my brain fall out.
What do you understand by energy then? Because I've been really trying to get my head around this.
We've seen these things over the years, haven't we? Remember The Secret?
A self-help book that reckoned you could attract wealth and health from the universe if only you believed hard enough.
In a simple way, there was nothing secret about The Secret. That was about what you put out is what you get back. And that's pretty straightforward. I mean, they made a lot of money out of selling that idea. The power of positivity, we know all about this. The thing I found really challenging at the energy bank was that hanging there with your mouth open, hyperventilating. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me. And if you want to see a good example of open mouths, go to any geriatric ward in the hospital. People at the end of life have their mouth hanging open, and ain't no energy coming in at that point.
Glenn knows a thing or two about breathing. We'll find out why shortly. Aiping Wang, was she there at the time?
No, I don't remember meeting her. She was this mystical figure that I don't think I ever met. So the people that I saw were basically her disciples.
Did it feel culty?
Very much.
What made you think that?
Yeah, the mystery around it. It just seemed like there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. But having said that, it did seem to work for him at the time. So I wasn't going to be too critical of something that I thought might be helping him.
You were being a good friend.
Yeah.
At that point, Warwick was attending sessions at the energy clinic on a bit of a wellness journey. It wasn't anything medical. He just wanted to improve himself. But that was before he got his HIV diagnosis, before the energy bank claimed to be able to get rid of the disease.
It's important to be really clear what we mean by a result in healing.
Sarah McCrum, energy bank manager.
It doesn't mean that people feel better. It means that people are better, that the doctor would say that the illness is gone. It must be that illness is completely gone. In fact, we would go further than the doctors. For us, it needs to be out by the root so that it can't come back again. That's really a cure.
It's hard to identify exactly what Warwick got out of his $75,000 energy treatment, but it certainly wasn't a cure.
Okay. I mean, if you guarantee something to someone, it's a pretty big thing to do,
Thomas, his flatmate at the time, speaking with Warwick.
I mean, I know you're gullible and you believe, you want to believe. No, but it's true. I don't say that in a negative way. I'm gullible too in a different way. It's good to want to believe. I totally give you that. But you've got to be aware that, they did say certain things. They said, we guarantee you to 800 in 6 months. And 6 months later, after the treatment, what was it again?
It's about 270 on average.
What they're talking about is Warwick's T-cell count, the measure of his immunity, which hadn't shifted at all. The treatment had failed.
By that time, he'd invested so much of himself into it, and he'd kind of taken himself down layer by layer that I don't know how much he had to fight back with, because everything that he was, they were telling him, was an energy blocker.
Then Warwick was offered the opportunity to go back to New Zealand and get one-on-one therapy with Aiping, the guru at the lodge. At this point, we don't know if he went. Warwick kind of disappeared off the map. Annie and Glenn both lost track of him.
My big worry was that because the energy bank wiped his debt clear and then said to him, come to New Zealand so that you can be with the master and in her presence every day kind of thing, I thought, oh God, here we go.
As soon as I got off the phone with Annie, I started looking for Warwick, her friend and documentary subject. Now, New Zealand's not such a big place, 5.3 million people. I was pretty confident I could track him down. Turns out he wasn't in Te Anau, but in Auckland, where I live. For non-Kiwis, Auckland is 1,700 kilometres away from the lodge. Googling away at home, I found references to Warwick working as a therapeutic masseuse, mentions of his involvement in the community here. I thought maybe he'd cut ties, parted company with Aiping, and he was living happily in Tamaki Makaurau, ideally on antiretrovirals, giving him the long life he'd wished for in Annie's doco.
I really would like to live out my full school years, 3 score years and 10, plus another score year and 10 on top of that, you know.
Then Warwick's name popped up online in a neighbourhood publication, together with a photo. A middle-aged man in a black V-neck sweater, buzz cut, little strip of beard on his chin, cheeky smile. He looked well. But that picture, his name and a glowing description, was part of a death notice. Oh well, just did some searching for Warwick and found an obituary for him from 2016 in the Ponsonby News from Auckland. Yeah. I texted BBC director Annie Kossoff to double check it was Warwick. Just checked with Annie. I sent the photo and that's him. So he died. We don't know what of. It said after a long illness. But yeah, really sad. Really sad.
Yeah, no, I was devastated actually, because I got very close to him and we kept in touch for a little while. He was a darling boy and he was just he had a spirit about him and he was very clever. He was very bright and very thoughtful. That's what I loved about him.
The obit read,
Those close to him held his hand as he transitioned to the next dimension on the 18th of January 2016.
So then he basically survived another 14 years after he made the film with me, which was kind of what the doctor had said to him. He would be lucky to have 5 to 10 years, if he kept refusing antiretroviral drugs.
In the death notice from 2016, it talks about him dying after a long illness, which makes sense.
Yeah. By that time, they deconstructed his personality to such a degree, I think, that it kind of, I suppose New Zealand was home, but he didn't really have anywhere else to go.
What neither of us knew at that point, Annie and I, was why or how Warwick died, what he died of. If his decision to use an alternative therapy instead of conventional medicine had played some part, I hope Glenn could shed some light on that. He told me that about 2 years after Annie last saw Warwick, in 2006, he popped up again back in Auckland, the old Warwick that Glenn used to know.
I can still remember him out the back here. We'd have big dinner parties and, on this back veranda here. And Warwick would be the life of the party. He was no wallflower. He did not hold back ever. I never saw him hold back. There's only 2 speeds, fast and stop.
He told me that Warwick didn't say anything about his medical condition till about 6 months before his death.
I've got this illness, but I'm really positive and we're doing this and we're doing that. He always maintained a positivity about it, that he was going to get well.
Glenn believes that what killed Warwick was a complication linked to the HIV, something that took advantage of his weakened immune system.
One of the opportunistic infections, or it could have been a cancer, I think. It could have been a lymphoma. I know he lost a lot of weight in the last few months. I also heard from one of the people that was at the hospital quite regularly when he died, that he was surrounded by folk in the end. There were, people coming and going day and night. So it was not a lonely death, that's for sure.
That's good to hear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because he's very much a people person.
Yes. For the short time he was back, which I'd say was about 10 years, he certainly made an awful lot of friends.
That's nice to think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Glenn was overseas when he heard that Warwick had passed.
I got the news, it's very sad to hear that Warwick had died, which was a bit of a shock because I I didn't think he was that close to death. Warwick had always been very positive.
He watched the funeral service online. It was pretty packed and pretty out there.
At his funeral, there was a woman who spoke. She was very much involved with Warwick at that time, and she was one of the people that gave an eulogy at the funeral. Now, I'm watching it, bear in mind, on Zoom from Japan. My ex-partner is watching it live from Tauranga, and this woman gets up and starts channeling Warwick at his funeral. And basically, in theory, Warwick is talking through this woman to the group at the funeral. And my ex-partner sends me a quick chat message saying, "Isn't it typical of Warwick gets the last word at his own funeral?"
And was it believable?
Well, one thing I will say is that probably this woman knew Warwick very well, because what she was able to convey in those words was very Warwick.
Death is one point. It's one point of a whole person's life.
Not a voice from beyond. It's Warwick from Annie's doco.
But, I look at it now, it's not what the whole thing of what life's about. It's how you actually get there.
Together, Glenn and I are trying to piece together what happened after Warwick came back to New Zealand.
My memory of the latter years for Warwick in Auckland was that he was fit and healthy. He had an active social life. He was working as a masseur. I have a bit of time over the weekend, and what I'll do is I'll call around a few people that knew him, and I'll just say, "Look, are you happy to speak to Phil?"
Glenn spoke to 6 different mutual friends. Strangely, none of them had even heard about the energy bank or Aiping Wang, and he suspects it was partly the embarrassment of failure.
I think he was embarrassed at the outcome, but I also think that his journey was a better journey for him in terms of the future. It sort of set him up to be a bit more reflective about himself and to have a bit more confidence in himself. So, but alongside that, of course, was huge embarrassment because it had failed, and he'd bought into it in such a big way.
Glenn reckons, on balance, that Warwick probably did take up Aiping's offer to join her at the lodge in Te Anau. That was when he first got back to New Zealand.
My assumption, and probably their assumption, was he came back to New Zealand for financial reasons, because he couldn't. His life in London was unsustainable at that point, financially. So, and my assumption is he did see Aiping, but who knows?
What we do know is that when Warwick left the UK, he certainly hadn't written off energy therapy. Maybe he did join Aiping at the lodge, but we don't know what sort of therapy he had with her, what she might have told him about his disease, HIV, and why he left after such a short time and came back to Auckland. Yet another reason to try and talk to the guru.
Maybe he went down there and probably decided fairly quickly, nah, maybe this is not a happening thing. And he withdrew at that point.
Whatever happened down there at the lodge, Glenn believes that Warwick never started taking antiretrovirals, drugs that could have dramatically prolonged his life. Glenn got hold of Thomas, Warwick's old flatmate from London. They'd stayed in touch right through to the end.
He's of the opinion that Warwick would probably still be with us today if he had taken, conventional treatments, and I'm probably of the same opinion. It's sad. I would, Warwick was a big part of my life. He was a larger-than-life person, and it's tough when you lose someone like that. But I really think that, he'd had a very full life, and I think the transformation that happened in Warwick was probably more important for him than perhaps that long life.
That's quite a big call, because what we're talking about, and I don't doubt it happened, those close to him registered it, that his personality and his ego changed from all of that work. But is that worth shortening your life by so much?
No, that's, if I have to put my own perspective on it, I would say no. But I wonder what Warwick would say.
We'll probably never know. I did try, through Glenn, for an interview with Sarah, the clairvoyant at Warwick's funeral. She wasn't keen. Now, it could be my age and stage, or my friend group, I don't know. But I keep hearing anecdotes from friends or family faced with a confronting medical condition who've taken a ride on the Supernatural Express, topped up their plates from the wellness buffet. And Annie's no exception.
I mean, I have a very dear friend who chose the alternative route and went to Mexico when she got cancer, and she died, within 3 years. And we kind of all knew she was going to die. But she did actually have a brilliant 3 years because she turned her back on conventional medicine that would have had her bedbound probably for most of that time, So it was her choice, and we all respected that.
There's a particular reason why I'm steering the conversation down this road about people's right to choose alternative treatments. My own personal experience was something a bit out of the ordinary. I guess I haven't shared this with many people, like a handful of people, and I'm not sure I necessarily want to even include it in the podcast, but I feel like I can confide in you at this stage. So 10 years ago, I got diagnosed with lymphoma, which is a blood cancer of the lymphatic system. And the prognosis was pretty grim. I got in early, but if it had got away on me, it would have been like 5 to 10 years, like Warwick, and I was pretty scared. So as part of my treatment, I found myself one evening out on the balcony under the Kauri forest at home with 3 light workers. These are healers who use light under a full moon.
Yes.
I had my eyes closed and they had their hands under my back and they were doing what they were doing. They weren't saying anything. And it might have been completely delusional, but I swear to gosh that I lifted off the ground. Not far, but just high enough to know that it was happening. So the next day, I got the cancerous lymph node out. I went on a pretty strict diet. I got super clean. And then a month later, the PET scan where they inject you with radioactive material, then shove you through an MRI, completely clear. I'm not saying that the woo-woo session on the balcony did it, but something happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing about energy, isn't it? And that's what the energy bank have tapped into. I mean, I believe in energy. I believe energy is a positive thing, and you can redirect your own. I'm with you. I mean, I'm like you. I think, I would have done what you did, without a doubt. I went along that journey with my girlfriend who didn't make it, but I was there with everything she did for 3 years. And I just was open and hoping that, it would. Sadly, she wasn't as lucky as you,
Did you ever say as a friend, why don't you do both? The woo-woo and the oncology.
I tried not to say it like that, but she wouldn't talk to me for about 2 months after I mentioned that because I wasn't believing enough then. She had me down as someone who didn't believe enough.
Glenn's also grappling with what he woulda, coulda, shoulda said to Warwick had he known what was going on for his friend in the last years.
Take a deep breath into your belly.
Annie's doco never played in New Zealand. Glenn was really keen to see that watershed moment in his friend's life. I lent him a copy. Okay, Glenn, well, we're back in your lovely house in Freeman's Bay. I guess let's just get your immediate impressions, please.
Well, I thought it was a very good documentary, and one thing that I wasn't prepared for was that documentary is Warwick. You didn't warn me about that, and that was cool because I was assuming he was just one of many people that were being interviewed.
Okay, sorry I didn't prepare you.
No, it's all right. No, it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I thought you'd get some enjoyment out of it. Actually, there was some beautiful moments.
No, it's the essence of Warwick is captured beautifully.
Past was about fear, brackets failure as well. The present is about hope, and the future is more hope.
I mean, that's the performance of his lifetime. He always wanted to be an actor at centre stage, and he got it in that documentary, and he did a great job.
Did you come away feeling sad? I certainly did.
Well, it reminded me of how charming and out there Warwick was, and yeah, I miss him. I think it would have been wonderful if he could have, somehow got got medicated in time. Because I know people who've have had HIV for over 30 years. It's not a death sentence anymore.
Not if you follow conventional treatment. Annie, the documentary maker, can't get past the original promise made by Aiping Wang and the Energy Bank, that guarantee of a complete cure.
It's kind of creepy and pretty dangerous in the end for him, it was.
And she's still livid about what they said to him when the experiment failed, how they appeared to blame Warwick and his behaviour for the failure.
It was his negative thoughts, his negative behaviour in the past that were all to blame for his HIV status. And I think it's outrageous, actually. I just think it's because these people are really vulnerable,
Surprisingly, for me at least, Glenn felt there was no one to blame for Warwick's premature death. It was his decision, and his alone, to take a non-conventional path.
I think that he lived a life like many of us, a life of contradictions, but I think he was always seeking, and I think that whoever he was involved with latterly, the spiritual group, was just a continuation of that curiosity and that exploration of spirit. That's Warwick. I don't think we can kind of level blame at Aiping and the Energy Bank. They found each other.
That's interesting. And I can tell you don't want his legacy to be as a victim of
Not at
this.
all. Not at all. I think, he ultimately went to his death very much in control. I really think that if it wasn't the Energy Bank, it would have been something else that Warwick would have found. He was curious, and I don't think he felt he was put on planet Earth just to party and have sex. He was here for a higher purpose.
A curious thing for a scientist to say, but there's more to Glenn than meets the eye. You'll remember he trained and worked as a geologist. Earth, minerals, substrata, all things you can touch and see. But Glenn's experienced his own miracle treatment for a medical condition.
I was diagnosed with asthma at the age of 2. So over the years, asthma was just always there, and as the different meds came along, I was kind of like the poster boy for every new med that came on. And I was always fit and healthy, but I was dependent on asthma medication. And I was basing myself in London, working in Southeast Asia. And I got really, really sick with asthma. And I got so sick I couldn't go back to work. And it was crippling. I had never been that sick before. I'd always sort of bounce back.
Glenn spent thousands on conventional specialists.
To cut a long story short, I'd heard about this modality that I teach called Buteyko in Bali, of all places. And it just kind of, I just remembered, wait a minute, what was that breathing technique? Anyway, I tracked down a practitioner in Newcastle, 5 sessions, asthma eliminated. From like 20 puffs of Ventolin a day down to nothing. And then I came off the steroids, and now it's 24 years later, I'm asthma-free and drug-free.
Glenn then trained in the method that had delivered him from asthma. Buteyko, a Japanese practice, and that's what he does now. It's his full-time job. That 19th century villa houses his consulting rooms. He's helped thousands of adults and children overcome asthma with this alternative breathing technique.
It's worth mentioning that because I have quite an open mind now around medicine, and I am very sceptical of the way modern medicine's practiced.
Which, again, causes me to re-examine my scepticism, going the other way. Had I let my rational brain make assumptions about Warwick's decisions, about how to deal with his HIV, his life, his death? Did I do that wildebeest rush to judgment thing? I mean, I didn't seem to have any problem with Glenn's non-conventional asthma cure.
Yeah, it's a very difficult issue, isn't it?
Stephanie Baker from City University in London. She wrote the book Wellness Culture, How the Wellness Movement Has Been Used to Empower, Profit and Misinform.
On the one hand, I think there'd be consensus that if you have figures who are encouraging people to refuse effective medical treatments, this is a serious problem. But there's a more grey area where changing one's mindset, having a sense of belief and hope may be what people need in order to persevere through very difficult times. And I'm reminded here of one of the founders of psychology and philosophy, William James, who really spoke in his work about his struggles with depression and the power of the mind, what he referred to as mind cure, to enable him to overcome these personal struggles.
So, a question. As fellow humans, bystanders, doctors, academics, journalists, family or friends, should we be trying to stop people we know from jumping on the wellness bandwagon? Or is that overstepping, compromising their right to choose? In Aiping's case, Annie Kossoff thinks the answer's pretty obvious.
I think with an organisation like that, they're asking you to hand over everything to this very questionable woman that they've put on a pedestal. And what they're promising in return, I don't think these people are able to digest or analyse enough, perhaps because they are vulnerable, because they have no other choices. So if you don't have a choice, is that a choice? It's like replacing God and spirituality, isn't it, with some self-made person who wants to take all your life, take all your money. So I think they have to be accountable, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
We see this connection between health and medicine and religion, and this involves a high degree of faith and belief, which is not always so easily decoupled.
Is that about the people, the proponents of this, the gurus or whatever, having some kind of God delusion? Or how does that come about in your experience and in your reading?
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to assume that we know people's motivations. I think it's also important to historically situate this in a lot of religious contexts where you would have, even Jim Jones, or say, for example, it might be some kind of religious figure or even a shaman who is bestowed with this healing power to not only help people recover from illness and disease, but to transform their lives from a state of despair to one of hope and prosperity.
They're not saying come and we'll release positive energy that may help you alongside other things. They're saying it's to the exclusion of everything else. And that is, for me, their biggest sin, really.
Which takes us back to this aspect of the energy bank treatment that troubled Warwick's NHS doctor, Sarah Fiddler, right from the start.
One of the anxieties I have is its exclusivity.
Exclusivity. The idea that your alternative treatment is the only alternative.
Yeah, if I had to be critical of one aspect of what the Energy Bank was delivering was that all or nothing approach. Being in health myself, we never pull the rug out from under people's feet. I mean, I can help get people off their asthma medications, but we get their asthma under control first. We can quantify that, and then through the doctor's supervision, people will be able to come off it. And I am critical or sceptical of any modality that says, nah, it's my way or the highway, and I think that's problematic.
Quite a problem. If that way means holding back on the drugs, the conventional treatments, and people die unnecessarily. John Patrick Allen recounts the sad tale of Suzanne Summers.
Come and knock on our door.
Come and knock on our door.
We've been waiting for you.
We've been waiting for you.
She was in vintage TV shows like Three's Company.
Three's Company too. Come and
Suzanne Summers was an actress, very popular, especially when I was a kid, or maybe even before I was a kid. She became an ambassador for like the Thigh Master and these workout videos.
Great legs.
Thank you.
Apologies for the overt 20th century sexism.
I used to do aerobics till I dropped. Then I found Thigh Master.
When Suzanne Summers got diagnosed, the US actor chose an alternative therapy to treat a life-threatening condition. Not only did it fail to work, it hastened her death.
She disregarded her physician's recommendation to pursue this type of hormone therapy. And unfortunately for her, prolonged use of this therapy for someone with her demographic makeup, the therapy actually increases a lot of problems that could actually lead to a cancer diagnosis or aggravate the cancer diagnosis if one already has it. And so ultimately she died because her cancer spread. And, she didn't get her normal treatment. And she started with breast cancer and then it spread. So this is one of these examples where a very popular person who's known for being healthy was very susceptible to going about alternative care and delaying, not just delaying, but all ignoring standard care and paying the ultimate price, and she lost her life.
Which is why it's so important, John Patrick says, not to take all wellness offerings on face value. Do your research. Take a long, hard look under the bonnet.
We have to be able to parse out signal versus noise, anecdotal evidence versus what has been systematically demonstrated to be true. And the idea that taking complementary medicine to alleviate a concern or alleviate a side effect or to help you be well rested to continue on with the treatment, that's all fine and well, I think, from what I understand about these processes. But the idea that you're going to pause against the advice of your oncologist, your treatment, to pursue something that has been unsubstantiated is really problematic.
If I had known, I would have probably drawn Warwick out a bit and say, hey, what are you doing? And, is this working for you?
Glenn certainly nurses some regrets that he didn't question Warwick more closely about his alternative approach. Warwick's decision not to take life-saving drugs.
So I don't know what held him back from doing those antivirals. I don't. So I don't know what I'd say. I never got a chance to say. Yeah, if I did have the chance, I'd say, maybe you should, Warwick. I know heaps of people around the world that are doing these things and they seem to be getting on with their life.
And you could keep on going for a whole lot longer.
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah. But, people get taken at different times, don't they? Whatever decision that Warwick made, maybe in some strange way he did choose his time. I don't know.
Warwick's death is another reason to try and get hold of Aiping again. I'd known nothing about his energy experiment back in 2004 when I made the 2020 documentary, so I never questioned her about it. I wonder whether she'd talked with Warwick about hospital treatment, like she told me she did with Giannis, who died at the lodge from melanoma.
I suggested him to go to hospital, but he refused.
Why do you think he refused?
He knows he cannot get help.
Did Aiping have the same sort of conversation with Warwick about antiretroviral drugs? If so, what influence might that have had? Because we know after hearing from Suzanne about her mum and Giannis that Aiping's influence was strong. It went beyond words. I wonder how Aiping feels about Warwick's premature death. I wonder if she even knows that he's passed. Be good to let her know, given how important she was in his life. That's The Ultimate Price, Ep 7 of 8 eps of The Lodge. Coming up...
2 weeks ago, I had severe stomach pain, and so I had to call an ambulance for myself.
Suzanne gets really sick. I ask her whether she'll use conventional medicine. You're not going to just turn to energy healing, are you?
Of course not.
And still no reply from the lodge.
There is no one available to take your call.
No comment from Aiping or her family.
Thank you so much.
I was after an interview with...
Bye-bye.
Okay. Nothing for it but to fly south to the epicentre of this wellness cult.
Welcome to Queenstown. Please keep your seatbelt fastened and remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been switched on.
Who or what are we going to find at the lodge? Even the neighbours don't really know what's going on.
Very quiet and secretive, so not really sure what goes on there.
But plenty of activity, it seems.
Yeah, you see lots of vehicles go in first thing in the morning.
7 kilometres away from the lodge. Feeling a bit nervous? Sorry, I'm just going to keep talking to you. And they have told Te Anau Police. That's up next on The Lodge. And hey, if anyone out there has some information about this wellness cult and its business activities, whether you're a follower, an ex-follower, or someone who knows someone who is, please get in touch. phil.vine@rnz.co.nz. Thanks for listening, and special thanks to Glenn White, Annie Kossoff, Dr. Stephanie Baker, and Dr. John Patrick Allen. Big ups to our marvellous RNZ engineers, Ben Pearce, Rangi Powick, and Jeremy Ansell. Thanks to my producery colleagues, Liz Garton, William Ray, and Justin Gregory. Cheers to Amrita Marks for the stunning tile visuals, Luke Bottle and Robert Stewart and our legal team, my executive editor, Tim Watkin, and the person that makes everything happen, Brianna Uritich-Gregg. Make sure you're following The Lodge wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. You can read more about this mind-boggling wellness cult and see photos of all the characters involved on the RNZ website. Links in the show notes. Shout out to Nick DeFries, Beat Nick, for his music. Also, cheers to the BBC and many thanks to Warner Brothers for access to the News Hub archives. Ka kite anō.